Anyone who operates steam equipment should be a student of boiler technology. The more we can learn from those who know, the better off we all are. Paul Beauchamp is the owner of Beauchamp Boiler and Restoration. In this seminar, he covers a wide variety of topics. We also benefit from the insight of another experienced boiler man in the audience. Matt Austin is a boiler inspector and has been a consultant to some of the largest steam programs in America. He's wearing a black baseball cap in the audience. We do hope this information is valuable to you. It took us days to do the subtitles for just this one seminar. Here's Paul.
So we start with a quality control program, and when we begin a project, as a customer, you come to me and say, I need a boiler for my 15-inch gauge locomotive. And so we start with the dimensional requirements and the steaming requirements, and we do a little bit of engineering and find out how much steam we need to get out of the boiler. And then we need to figure out the shape that you want if you're trying to go for a specific style. In the case of this partially fabricated boiler, this is going to be for a mogul. It just so happens that this one's going to Redwood Valley at some point. So when we sat down to work on, when I sat down to design this, I had the benefit of some of Eric Thompson's original drawings, which made my life a little easier because I could figure out where the lines needed to be. And he did a pretty good job of calculating out the heating surface of the boiler. The heating surface translates into how much steam the boiler is going to be able to produce. If you need a boiler that produces 100 pounds of steam per hour, then you need to have a certain amount of heating surface, and heating surface translates into boiler horsepower. Just for whatever it's worth, there's 5 square feet of heating surface to 1 boiler horsepower. This particular boiler will generate about 8.5 to 9 horsepower when it's finished. And you multiply your horsepower times 34.5, and that's how many pounds per hour you get. So we're looking at roughly 300 pounds an hour, which is a fairly significant amount of steam.
In addition to decades of 15-inch gauge experience, Robert has also logged over 1 million miles as an engineer on the Santa Fe and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. You may not agree with everything he says, but this seminar will bring to you the ideas and the opinions that have shaped Traintown into one of the most secure and robust miniature railroad operations to be found anywhere.
It's an honor to be amongst you. Just out of curiosity, with the showing of hands, how many have been to Traintown? Okay, well, there's no point in converting the converted. We're exactly 224 miles and a tenth, a very pleasant 4-hour drive. And I have an interest, almost a self-serving interest in being with you because your interest is my interest and vice versa. And what I mean by that is I don't want you to unnecessarily go through the decades of time, trouble, turmoil, pain, of needless experimentation. I have over 40 years experience in this business. Almost 30 years in standard gauge, over 40 years in 15-inch gauge. And one of the things that I want to emphasize here is I don't want you having accidents, which would tend to drive up our insurance rates. And I want you to bring your own operations online as soon as possible so that they're as attractive to the public as possible. If we elevate each other, we could enculturate an entire people that will go railroad hopping, much the same way as people go winery hopping today. Very interesting culture, enculturation point. We talk about 2,000 for an engine versus $500,000 or $1 million. It's interesting how in our culture, people will pay over $1 million for a rancid bottle of wine, literally, but yet begrudge having to pay somebody $75 or $80 an hour to crank out a worthy piece of machinery. So, that said, before I get into the meat of the matter, which is culture, there's just several technical points that I want to cover.
Jack Bodeman is a professional builder who does commissioned work in scales ranging from 1 inch to 5 inch. He also works on full-size narrow gauge equipment. He is one of those men endowed with both technical ability and a true aesthetic sense. He has made the leap from being a craftsman to being an artist. His topic today is forming sheet metal.
Well, hello everybody. Oh, I'm Jack. Because I knew you'd be here. What? Because I knew you'd be here. You can get it from me. Hi, I'm Jack Bodenman, and I'm going to tell you a few things about sheet metal forming, and it's kind of a neat way to make stuff for your models. You know, what is sheet metal forming for the model builder? Well, it can be produce parts such as backhead wrappers, saddle tank ends, throat sheet wrappers, number board frames, steam domes, sand domes, copper boiler parts. Oftentimes it's easier to make them out of sheet metal than it is to hog them out of solid stock. A lot more efficient with your material also. It can be metal spinning on the lathe. Produce things such as cylinder head covers. A lot of the parts of this headlight are made that way. The reflector, certain parts of the body made with metal spinning. Then it can be hot forming, which is used for steel, and you can make stuff such as the body for this fire door, and you can make neat little stuff like this coal shovel. Wanted to touch on a couple of things first. Layout and measuring. One of the things you want to do is, first thing you want to do is clean your material. Use lacquer thinner or mineral spirits. Can't write on dirty material. And if it's rusty, you're using steel and it's rusty, you can use a product called metal etch. You can get it at Ace Hardware. Mix it with a little water. Takes all the rust and corrosion off. Another thing you want to do when you're working sheet metal, as soon as you select your workpiece and you kind of get it roughed out, you want to knock all the edges off with a file. That way you don't have to worry about cutting yourself when you're thinking about other things that are more important.
On most railroads, the most complicated and most critical piece of track work is the switch. If you build it right the first time and take care of it, it will reward you by not throwing your engine and cars on the ground. Sean Bautista shows us how the Hillcrest shops build their commercial quality switches. This was a hands-on seminar, and there were a lot of things going on, so it may be helpful to review some of the terminology before we begin. A Class 1 railroad switch has about a gazillion parts, and each one has its own name. We'll cover some of the important ones here. First, let's talk about the term switch itself. When referring to the entire unit, the terms switch and turnout are used interchangeably. But when you're talking about the various pieces of the unit, then the term switch applies to the assembly of two short rail pieces and the connecting rods that actually move back and forth. The rod that's controlled by the switch stand is called the head rod. The points are the sharp end. The heel is the blunt end at the somewhat flexible joint. The heel spread is the distance between the heel and the stock rail. The stock rails are the two rails of the track leading into the switch. There is the straight stock rail and the curved stock rail. Between the points and the frog are the two closure rails, the straight closure rail and the curved closure rail. These are the guard rails. The frog has a toe and a heel. These are the wing rails, and this is the point of the frog. The Hillcrest crew has also coined their own phrase called the box, where they spike in critical ties first to hold the dimensions of the switch. Now here's the seminar.
A number 6 switch is 6 inches for 1 inch of deviation. So the lower the number, the more extreme the switch. Our yard siding, our shop siding that comes in here is somewhere like around a number 2. It's dang near a 45-degree angle coming out of that thing. This is a number 8. This is what we would call a high-speed switch. Now, some railroads, if you're running bigger equipment or like standard, standard gauge type stuff, like John, where's John Woods? John, where are you at? Is he around? John's he's getting a big Northern built for him, and his radiuses are all 200 to 300 foot. And so we just sold him some number 10 switches. And he's been asking us about building him number 12 switches. The big switch that goes across that controversial grade crossing is a number 12, and it's about 70 feet long in the same form. Now this switch, as you see it, actually is how we sell them. This is so we can ship them. So we have a staggered joint on the lead end, and we end up with try to do a 1-foot stagger on the frog end. But the actual switch goes for about another 12 feet beyond that of full-length ties before you go to individual ties splitting off of that.